Senator, you and a number of your colleagues sent a letter to President Biden regarding the looming debt ceiling. What was the message you sent to the president in that letter?
A couple dozen Republican colleagues of mine joined with me to send a letter to President Biden, just stating our shared ongoing commitment to the policy of the Senate Republican Conference, which is that any debt ceiling increase needs to be accompanied by structural spending reform and or corresponding cuts in ongoing spending.
You gathered together with a number of other signers of this letter to address the media yesterday in a press conference. Following each of your respective remarks, the members of the media there were able to ask questions. A reporter asked a question of the group and prefaced it by claiming that the question regarding the debt ceiling, that the answer is a binary one, that you must either increase revenue or cut spending. Is the choice truly a binary one?
No, it's not. And I winced a little bit when the reporter said that. It's really not just a binary one. First of all, it can involve a combination of those two things. But more importantly, it can and should also involve pro-growth decision-making. Any pro-growth decision-making can be factored into that. Pro-growth meaning things likely to stimulate increased economic activity that will in turn bring more revenue into the federal government. In other words, he was saying you've got to either cut taxes or you've either got to increase taxes or you've got to cut spending. And that simply isn't true. There are other combinations at play. And I think we really do need to look at pro-growth policies and just as importantly, figuring out how to deal with anti-growth regulations. There are some regulations that are necessary and can't be altered. There are other regulations that are needlessly burdensome and that are suppressing a lot more economic activity than they need to. And I think that also should be on the table.
On Twitter, via @BasedMikeLee, you shared a quote from an op-ed recently penned by Russ Vought in Newsweek. Vought, of course, the former OMB director and currently president of the Center for Renewing America. He said, quote, "The main priority of congressional Republicans in the upcoming fight over the debt limit should be to deliberately link the effort to rein in out-of-control spending with the removal of the scourge of a woke and weaponized bureaucracy." Let me ask you, please describe that scourge and its weaponization.
Okay, first of all, you got to remember the last time a major analysis of how much federal bureaucracies cost the American economy with their burdensome economic regulations. About a decade ago, they estimated the cost to be around $2 trillion a year. Federal regulations have become a lot more expansive, numerous, and burdensome since then. It wouldn't surprise me if that number today would be more like $3 trillion a year. And it's not just the amount of economic activity they're chilling and killing. It's also the fact that it's been weaponized in significant ways. A lot of these bureaucrats are doing things that are resulting in people having to make tragic choices between getting a medical procedure that they don't want and losing their ability to put bread on the table. The fact that we've got soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who have been forced to make that choice is one of many examples of this. And so I think part of what Russ Vought was talking about is we've got to de-weaponize the federal government in its ongoing efforts under the Biden administration to punish and dispirit, de-energize those who disagree with the Biden administration.
Understood. During that press conference I mentioned earlier, many reporters were eager to hear specific negotiating terms from you and your Senate colleagues. For the most part, you and your colleagues have been quick to remind the press that these are negotiations which will originate in the House. Why is that important? Why is it important to illustrate that point?
Well, Republicans control the House of Representatives. Republicans are not in the majority in the Senate. And so because Republicans are in control over there, our best shot at getting something passed, something that can address the debt ceiling and also address the reasons why it has to be increased, are most likely to originate in the House. I wish it were also the case that Democrats and Republicans, enough of us could come together in the Senate to originate something here that would bring about the kind of reform. It seems very unlikely. And so it is most likely that any good that can happen through this is going to originate in the House. That's why we've been in ongoing conversations, not just with members of the Senate, but also with members in the House.
Excellent. Last question. As constituents try and make heads or tails of how this debt ceiling may impact their lives, specifically the debate over how things will be settled, what do you tell them?
Well, first of all, if we do our job right, it doesn't have to impact the lives of very many Americans at all. Outside of government, it shouldn't have a big impact, unless, of course, you've got a vested interest in seeing a perpetually hyper-aggressive, hyper-active administrative state in Washington. But I do think, more importantly, if we do nothing, that's where the greatest risk to the American people, to hardworking Americans everywhere, people throughout Utah and across the country, because we're reaching the point where interest rates are starting to increase. The rate at which we have to pay investors who buy U.S. Treasuries is going up all the time. And for every 1% increase in the interest that you've got to pay on a soon-to-be $32 trillion national debt, you're talking about an enormous sum of money. You're talking about $300 billion for every 1 point that goes up. So with interest rates going up and our national debt soaring, we're soon going to see, instead of annual interest payments in the realm of, $250, $300, $400 billion a year, you likely will, within the next 2, 3, 4 years, see annual interest on the national debt go north of $1 trillion. And once we reach that point, we won't have many tools at our disposal left, which is why we've got to get hold of this now before that happens. If we do nothing, if we were just to do what President Biden has suggested and just blindly raise the debt ceiling without any ongoing reforms, we're really putting the American people and the American economy at risk, and we shouldn't be doing that.
Senator, thank you.
Thank you.